the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to the special show on the meeting of security czars from the US, the UK and Russia in Delhi over the last few days. I'm Surya Gangadharan and my guest for this evening is Nandan Unnikrishnan, who heads the Russia Studies program of the Observer Research Foundation in Delhi. Nandan, welcome. Thank you for taking part.
Thank you for inviting me.
So Nandan, when the heads of MI6, the British intelligence service, the CIA, and now you have Nikolai Patrushev from Russia, when they all converge on Delhi, albeit separately, what does one draw from this?
Well, one is I think you have to draw that India commands a certain heft in international affairs, particularly when there is an issue that is in the focus of everyone's attention, that there are people, there are countries, major players that want to consult with India. So they are all here. The second thing we should keep in mind, I mean, although they're all with security backgrounds, there is a certain sort of protocol difference in the sense that Burns is the head of the CIA, the Brit is again the head of their spy agency, but Patrushev is, in a sense, a level above. He is the national security advisor. So he comes with a much wider range of powers and a much wider remit for discussion.
So before we go further, I'd like to quickly sum up the meeting with Patrushev, since that was the most recent. He just left. And I'd like to play a graphic at this point, basically reflecting what India and Russia agreed upon during the Patrushev visit. So broadly, it was concern over the presence of terror groups in Afghanistan, the flow of weapons across Afghan borders, the threat posed to Central Asia and, of course, India, and the risk of Afghanistan becoming an opium hub. Also, the need for the Taliban to deliver on the promises that they have publicly made. Nandan, you have any comments on this?
No, I think, firstly, we need to draw two distinctions, if you want. One is the commentary that takes place on the pages of newspapers, including op-ed articles. The other is what governments actually do, And if you look at these, you will find there is a large dissonance in what the government does and what the editorials comment on. Just hold on. Can I interrupt this?
Go ahead.
मुझे नहीं मालूम. Just hold on. That's my.
Just hang on. Nandan has got a little domestic emergency. He'll be back any minute. And sorry about this. We'll just take a minute. So there you have pictures of the meeting today. And that's Patrushev, the Russian National Security Advisor, and there's Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister. This is at the meeting in South Block.
I'm sorry, Surya, my mother-in-law suddenly barged in. I totally unexpected.
Let's leave it there. Let's leave it there. So, and let me ask my question again. What are your takeaways from this graphic that you've just seen?
Well, I think as what I was mentioning earlier is that there is a distinction between what you see in newspaper commentaries and what governments actually do. So since the 15th of August, I think most countries, I don't think they are seeking to put blame on someone and say, this is your fault, this is mine. They're all looking at how to deal with the problem. Yeah. And most countries have identified the most important tasks. And whether it's the USA, whether it's Russia, whether it is China, Iran, or India, we all, I think, seem to agree that the first thing that we need is that there should be stability and peace in Afghanistan. The Afghan people have suffered for way too long. The
Yeah.
second is that the Taliban regime had made certain promises, promises of an inclusive and representative government, promises of allowing certain social activities which in their earlier avatar they had banned, and also they had committed not to allow radical elements to operate from their territory in third countries. So these are the fundamentally three most important uh, promises that the rest of the world wanted the Taliban to adhere to. So, if you look at what your graphic displayed, roughly those are the issues that are covered. And I don't think I find any country that would be really divergent from that agenda. However, what happened yesterday in terms of the kind of government that was announced and the kind of people who have taken fairly important government positions, I think a certain amount of concern has re-emerged amongst the major international community players in the region about where all this in Afghanistan is headed. The other concern is that there is a certain element of brutality in the way the Taliban regime is dealing with some protests internally, and also reports of uh, opponents of the regime or people who worked with the Americans or the NATO earlier, retribution being visited upon them by the Taliban. Although, of course, the Taliban claims they are not supporting it, but basically elements who may not be under control at some point.
Would you say that given these developments in Kabul, the security relationship between India and Russia is now the main basis of these ties, leading to a closer, would you say security is now what really underpins their relationship?
You know, I think we also have to again revisit the Indo Soviet relationship. Even the Indo-Soviet relationship, security was the main thread, whether it was the MiG-21s or whether it was the Indo-Soviet treaty or subsequent military supplies. Security was the main sort of spine of the relationship, the vertical around which everything else was built. Of course, the Soviet Union's approach to India was very different from Russia. Secondly, Soviet Union was a different power. It had a different capacity, different agenda. But I think if you now bring that to our relationship with Russia, particularly since 2018, it is remarkable how, in the last 3 years, our relationship has deepened and expanded, if you want, into several other areas beyond security. I think both governments are still sort of trying to see how to establish these new areas, how to energize them or sort of realize the potential. But they're well on the way. So I think it's my feeling that security will continue to be the main thread around which this relationship is woven. But there are many, many other elements in it.
Would you say the fact that Russia has a direct link to the Taliban, they've been talking to them for some time, that also adds to the need for us to perhaps consult them, more often?
No, again, again, I may be sounding like a minority of one, but I think India has to firstly figure out what are Indian interests in Afghanistan. If it is merely to stop export of radicalism or terrorists into our territory, then there is one thing that we'll have to do. If
Yeah.
we have more than that, then we have to look at it differently. I think India's approach to Afghanistan has to be more than merely some terrorists coming into infiltrating via, being trained in Afghanistan and then being infiltrated by Pakistan. That is a threat. I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting it's not and should not be dealt with. But I think our relationship with Afghanistan, we have to focus around our relationship with the Afghan people, what they have been through, and what their expectation from India is to a country to which they have very warm feelings. And I have seen this myself when I have traveled through the valley of Panjshir in 2001, and I have subsequently visited Afghanistan. I have seen the warmth with which Indians are treated.
Yeah, but Nandan, warmth and all that is fine when we are, at the end of the day, it's hard strategic issues, national interests that come in. What are our interests there apart from checking? I'm coming back to what you just said. Apart from checking, preventing the use of Afghan soil for terror activities against us, what are our other interests there?
No, it sounds as if the only interest that we have beyond our borders are security interests. That is not the case. We build a gamut of interests around any relationship. Our interests and our relationship with the United States is not purely security. Yes, of course, there's economics, but there's also people to people, there's culture, there are various other aspects to it. And similarly, with the people of Afghanistan, you have a security this thing, but you also have a people to people relationship. Yes, you don't have a security relationship with them, and it is not likely as long as Pakistan is a significant intermediary in the setup in Kabul. You are unlikely to be able to play a direct security role in any manner. But at the same time, I think you have the relationship with all the major players around Afghanistan where you can shape at least the conversation or attempt to shape. Okay, you may not have the capacity to shape it, but to attempt to shape the conversation around. You have excellent relationships with Central Asia. You have very good relationship with Russia. You have an excellent relationship with the United States. You have good relationships with Iran and the Middle East. So you have friends in the region, as it were, who would be willing to take your concerns on board, and that is what we should work with.
So let me push this a little further. Commercial stakes, economic interests. I mean, you can't say walnuts and dry fruit are big commercial stakes there. And as for all those minerals and etc., rare earths, whatever that are supposed to be lying beneath the ground in Afghanistan, I mean, getting access to that is a Herculean task. May not even happen in the next couple of years.
No, a couple of years, it's unlikely to happen in any case. But the point is, what is the world waiting for? The world is looking at Afghanistan and wants to see how the Taliban regime is going to govern. Right? I am not sure they have the capacity to govern. That is one aspect.
Yeah.
Beyond that, if we look at it, we need to see what kind of regime they're going to have, what kind of rule they will be providing to the Afghan people, whether we can work with it or we cannot work with it. So, what I mean is, for example, we must not keep quiet about atrocities or any excesses that are happening in Afghanistan. We don't have to be. We can voice our concern about those things. So, I think these are genuinely early days for us to make any final judgments. In some ways, what Mr. Jaishankar said, that we are in wait and watch mode, I think applies. I mean, yes, waiting and watching for 9 days is not the appropriate time. You have to wait for a little longer.
Okay, so the CIA chief William Burns was also here, and do you sense the American priorities now have changed? They no longer are sitting in Afghanistan. Their troops are not dying. They have been dying for quite some time. Their priorities have changed. They have other interests. What could that be? And Burns was in Delhi, then he went on to Islamabad.
No, look, America clearly is not. America is a predominant power. Obviously, they are not the
It
same
is, yeah.
America that they were, but they are today still the predominant power in the world. And I don't think that they um plan to abandon that role of being the preeminent power. So they would, if I was a preeminent power, I'd like to have my finger in every pie around the place. So I don't think they're going to abandon this region.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they have a very limited set of tools to play with at this point of time, right, in terms of physical presence. So they too will operate, I think, in much like India in a sense, but of course with much more heft through others. One of the things, of course, is that they will want to have a working relationship with Pakistan, uh, which they've had for 20 years, despite being deceived by Pakistan repeatedly. But they, at the same time, managed to get some of their aims met. So
Yeah.
they are not going to abandon that uh, path, if you want, which they had pursued for so long. So, but on the other hand, in geopolitical terms, I mean, if you look at the whole world, they're shifting focus undoubtedly. The focus is
Yeah.
shifting from this region towards the Indo-Pacific or Asia-Pacific. I mean, call it what you want, and the United States has, whether we like it or not, we also have to recognize that they have that much bandwidth because they have a huge number of problems back home they have to deal with. So it's not as if they have huge bandwidth to deal with the world. And they will focus on the Indo Pacific, which, in a sense, is a positive for us.
What are MI6's ambitions in this part of the world? They've had a long relationship with the Pakistani intelligence ISI. What are their, and why was he here?
I again, this might sound, I don't mean it with any levity, but I
Yeah.
think the Great Britain hasn't come to terms with the fact that they are not a major world player already. They still believe that they have the capacity to intervene in areas and situations uh, in a positive and decisive manner. Unfortunately, that is not true, and very often what happens is that they they do mess things up. I mean, just look at Afghanistan. It
Yeah.
was Britain that dealt with Helmand, and they are the first region in which compromises started with the Taliban.
Yeah.
And then you had all kinds of results, including opium growth. So I really don't know, but India has a particular policy towards Europe. India has is investing certain amount of attention in Britain as it is. And therefore, from that perspective, from an Indian perspective, we should be talking to everybody, including Britain. We should not forget that Britain is part of the Five Eyes organization.
Yeah.
So it is, in that sense, important. It is part of the United Nations Security Council. It has weight even at the international level. So there are certain attributes the United Kingdom carries that have importance for India.
So I have a question from Varun Pratap, one of our viewers. He says China and Pakistan have only one objective, to contain India. They don't care about their diametrically opposite ideologies when it comes to India.
No disagreement. What can one say on that? I mean, yes, but you see, you must remember one thing. China is not, that is one thing that we have to keep in mind at all points of time. China is never going to do anything for charity, A, and B, China is never going to do anything that it thinks is harming its national interest.
Yeah.
So if at some point it finds that the policy it is pursuing is actually not delivering what it requires, believe me, the Chinese will change. So it is
What do
up
we
to us
expect?
to increase the costs.
Sorry, say again.
It is for us to increase the costs of whatever negative policies towards us they are pursuing to make them look at the cost benefit analysis and decide that this is not a path worth pursuing.
You think the Russians, perhaps even the Chinese, may have anticipated the kind of cabinet lineup that the Taliban unveiled yesterday?
I don't know about the Russians. I'll be very honest. I don't know. What I read in the newspapers and the reaction I saw on Russian news channels yesterday, there appeared to be an element of surprise uh,
Surprise,
at the
okay.
at the inclusion of Haqqani, at the sidelining of Baradar and Stanikzai. But again, we are talking media. Whether the officials were equally surprised, I don't know. In fact, that would be known to the Indians who sat in the meeting with
Yeah.
Patrushev, and Mr. Kabulov was also there. So Russia's Afghan Tsar was in that delegation and he attended the meeting. So they would know what they expected and did not expect. As far as the Chinese are concerned, I think it's clear today from their welcoming the government and even providing humanitarian aid, which is needed, urgently
Needed,
needed.
yeah.
I'm not for a moment suggesting that that's a wrong thing to do, but the point is that the way they have announced it indicates that they don't seem to find, they're not distressed unduly by the type of government that has been announced.
The Taliban refusal to accommodate women, other minorities. There were one or two. There was a Tajik and perhaps one Uzbek, and by and large, sticking to the kind of people they wanted. It tells you something about their thinking, their attitude, and perhaps the way they will even go forward.
But Surya, we in India at least have always maintained that there are no good talibs and bad talibs. They're all the same. We've always said they're all ISI controlled. They're all bad. Blah blah blah.
Yeah,
You know what we have said. So why are
yeah,
we surprised? For us, this should be par for the course, right?
yeah.
We should turn around
Absolutely.
and tell the world this is what we told you is going to happen. You were the ones who were saying, oh, no, no, they will do inclusive. They have promised us this, they have promised us that. So now we should turn around and tell the world, here it is. Please be my guest now. Do something.
Okay, another question from Indian Tides. Is it not in the national interest of Afghanistan to get Fatah back? How much can we help them in fulfilling their national aim in this regard, assuming their non interference in JNK?
No, look, you have to try and understand. Yes, Taliban originally was born in Afghanistan of Afghan requirements. Let's put it like that. In Afghan circumstances, Pakistan adopted it and nurtured it subsequently. It became a tool for Pakistan at a later stage. But the point is, right now, the Taliban is in control of the situation in Afghanistan. And they are not going to do anything at all. They are not going to make any moves that will hurt Pakistan in the immediate future. There is going to be no such thing. So don't expect them to try and declare independence from Pakistan and all. Just see the demonstrations which were against Pakistan in
Absolutely.
Afghanistan. They were put down
Amazing.
brutally. Yeah,
Amazing.
so
Yeah.
the people are against, but the regime is not, and the regime will
Yeah.
protect that relationship. If I was a Talib at this point of time, when I have no recognition from the rest of the world, there is only one power in this world which is so far supporting me. Why would I cut my umbilical cord?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So to come back to the point that you made earlier, this is the last question. about India's strategic interests in Afghanistan. Has the time now come for us to, perhaps step back and be honest with ourselves that perhaps Afghanistan may not matter very much? Their internal developments are their own. They have to deal with their own people. And if the people are objecting to the Taliban, well, so be it. And we need to step away, perhaps go invest in Africa and somewhere else.
No, I don't think abandonment is a policy. I mean, this is in our region. It is impacts us directly and indirectly, whatever happens in Afghanistan. However, what I think is that India must keep a close watch on what is happening in that country. India must encourage voices of dissent or amplify them if necessary. It will obviously not be met with enthusiasm. These kind of things will not be met with enthusiasm by the Taliban regime. But at the same time, I think engagement with the Taliban regime is also not to be excluded from the agenda. Of course, we need to know why we are engaging. We should be clear in our minds as to what we are engaging for. Engagement is not in itself a policy. You don't engage for the sake of engagement. So these are issues, and of course, we cannot ever forget that there is amongst the Talibs a representation that is going to reflect maybe interests beyond Afghan interests, and I namely mean Pakistan interests. So all these complicated calculations have to be made, and we have to calibrate our policy to take all this into calculation. But abandonment per se, and sort of isolating and closing the border and saying we don't want to deal with you, I don't think that is the policy. Selective migration is also not going to help. I mean, I believe today I heard that there are some Hazaras who are trying to migrate and they're not getting e-visas. These kind of things, because of our domestic compulsions, are not going to help us with the goodwill of the Afghan people, which today we have. And eventually resistance to the Taliban will succeed and be useful only if the people of Afghanistan are behind it. Without the people of Afghanistan, you will not be able to dislodge the Taliban. Nobody in the world today is going to go in with another military action like in 2001.
So more strength to the arm of the average Afghan. And Nandan, thanks very much. We're at the end of our time. Lovely talking to you as always, and looking forward to continuing this conversation in the future as Afghanistan will remain on the radar.
Thank you, Surya. Thank you for inviting me.
And for all of you out there with your questions and comments, thank you very much. Keep tracking us on our website, on YouTube, on social media. Thank you and good night.